Good morning, everyone. I am Sien Dan Ye, Grandpa Don. And I'm very happy to be with you this morning to provide some information about the teachings of early Chan and how these things can be a lesson to us and can help us in our present day, psychologically. So this is the Buddhist psychology of legends and lineage. The story of Bodhidharma and this little known monk who, in a sense, was as famous or even more so than Bodhidharma during this early period of Chan. His name is Sengchou. His name translated as master of a community of many. So I want to talk a little bit about this because if you're like me, like most of us, we have been taught that Chan Buddhism started in China when Bodhidharma came from the West, Shilai, as we say, came from the West, from India at around 515 AD. Some people give some different dates, but it's close to that time. And Bodhidharma was the 28th lineage master after Gautama Buddha, Parinibbana in 483 BCE. Again, these dates are a question. You'll notice that I use the term lineage master and not patriarch. I'm not a big fan of the word patriarch because some of the great teachers are women. So we don't want to be gender biased here, particularly in 21st century. We can use the word lineage master, I think is better. So in the standard lineage history of Chan, the Bodhidharma was unknown when he came to southern China around 515 AD, and he became known as the red-bearded barbarian. And his fame soon spread. And there are a number of legends about this. If I gave a talk on just the legends related to Bodhidharma, we would be here into the night. But one of the stories is about when he was invited by the emperor of the Liang dynasty, Wu Di, who was a devoted supporter of Buddhism. He gave a lot of funds and money and built temples and was very involved in practicing. He invited Bodhidharma to the capital at Jiangkan, which is now Nanjing. So Bodhidharma was asked by Wu Di how much merit he had gained by being such a great patron of Buddhism. And Bodhidharma famously answered, "No merit." And this upset the emperor. And later when he went to his room, Bodhidharma, after the meeting, one of the attendants said, "It would be good for you to leave before perhaps the emperor becomes even more angry and puts you in jail." So he escaped by floating on a reed across the Yangtze River. So there are many famous pictures, paintings of Bodhidharma floating on a reed across the Yangtze River. I like this legend. It's probably a reed boat, but I like the story that he floated across on a reed. It makes him a little bit more supernatural. Yes. These exaggerated stories are called hagiography in the literature of the scholars. So we've been taught about this, and that Bodhidharma practiced. Then when he escaped, he went to Mount Song, just north of Huayang, and he did wall meditation. He sat in a cave for 9 years, and then he was approached by a person who was very, very desperate, who wanted to attain enlightenment. And he, to show how dedicated he was, in the legend, he cuts off his arm, and then he asks the Bodhidharma to pacify his mind. A very famous exchange. Hopefully, Huike did not cut off his arm, but it's a good story. So we've all been taught that the Bodhidharma started the Chan lineage and passed it on in his transmission to Huike, who transmitted the Dharma to Sengchou, who then transmitted it to Daosin, who then transmitted it to Hongran. And all of these masters avoided court positions and politics and refused invitations from the Tang Dynasty emperors, including the very powerful Empress Wu. They remained reclusive in mountain retreats. So we know in the lineage, this chart has a lot of words on it, but not to matter, that just to know that Bodhidharma passed on his teachings to Huike. That's all we need to know from this chart here. And then the next chart, we can see the lineage from the masters, from Sengchou to Daosin to Hongran, and then to Huineng. We'll get to him in a moment. In the next, we can see Huineng, his body actually remains in a kind of mummified state, self-mummified perhaps. I don't know that there is a self, but apparently his body did not deteriorate after dying, and he's still sitting up in a cave. We have people can go visit this. According to the Platform Sutra, which was a sutra that was composed based on a talk that Huineng gave about how he received the transmission from his teacher, the fifth lineage master, Hongran. It occurred when Hongran asked his students to compose a poem to express their best understanding of the Dharma. And there was a senior student, his name was Sengchou, who was considered the most advanced, and his poem was put in the hallway. And then this 24-year-old illiterate wood merchant, who was put to work in the kitchen, helping the monks, he asked for some help from one of his cohorts to compose his own, would write down the words for his poem. And when Hongran later saw this, he realized that the kitchen helper had realized enlightenment. And it was then that he later passed on his lineage robes to this cook, whose name was Huineng. Huineng thus became known as the great sixth lineage master, from whom the 5 schools of Chan emerged. This is all that we have been taught. So the next slide, I'm very happy about this slide, because this slide is one that gives the geography of this. On the left-hand side, we see Bodhidharma leaving from India by sea, going around Malaysia, and then he arrives in southern China around Guangzhou in 515, and then he travels over to Jinkang, and that's where he sees the Emperor Wu Di, And then he escapes from there, and then he goes up to Huayang, the Mount Song. And then that's where according to the dating at 528, after sitting for 9 years in the cave, Huike meets him, and that's when he begins his training, and eventually Huike passes on his teachings, and eventually by the time Daoxin is the fourth patriarch, they have settled in an area called Twin Peaks, Shuangfangshan, or Eastern Mountain, which the East Mountain School begins just north of Wuhan. And then eventually the school breaks up from the mountain, and Huineng later ends up in Guangdong, near Guangzhou again, and starts his temple there. In case we run out of time, I will just tell you that the name of the town where Huineng starts his temple is called MABA town. Our temple is called MABA, Mid-America Buddhist Association. MABA town means a horse levee. Apparently there was a river there, and there was a levee that was built, and the horses must have gone back and forth in that time. So it's just an interesting coincidence, or Master has been fooling us for the last 25 years. We don't know. So this is the standard lineage of Chan. So, so the story is that Huineng, in this poetry contest, he writes a better poem than the person who's expected, Sengchou, and Sengchou leaves East Mountain and goes up to Huayang, where he is incognito for 10 years and then reemerges and becomes the court favorite. He is praised by Empress Wu. Empress Wu, very, very devoted to Buddhism. Unfortunately, Empress Wu in her personal life was a very brutal ruler, killed many people, even her own relatives. So, you know, this is kind of a disturbing characteristic. So here we have a map of Sengchou's travels, where he left the East Mountain north of Wuhan, and then went to Huayang, and then spent the rest of his life going back and forth between the two capitals, the east capital of Tang, Huayang, and the west capital, Chang'an, which is now Xi'an. My little, in translation, I think it got moved a little bit, but that's where that is, the box. So this is the standard model. And so unfortunately, we don't get more of what's going on. There were other monastics practicing Chan in China around the same time as Bodhidharma. And one of these monastics, his name was Sengchou, who practiced also in a cave. And his cave was located near Anyang. We'll get to that in a bit. And according to Dao Yuan, who is the person who put together this text called The Continuation of the Biographies of Eminent Monks, in his historical record, he praises both Bodhidharma and Sengchou, but he also criticizes them as well. Dao Xuan was the third generation disciple of Sengchou. but he tried to be even-handed in his statements about them. But there were also in this text, we find out that there were 5 lineages that were being represented by different teachers during this time. Bodhidharma is not one of these big 5. Bodhidharma and his group are not part of this big history in the text because they refuse to have anything to do with court invitations. So they avoided all of the political amenities and the intrigues. For example, Emperor Wenchuan of the Northern Qi dynasty. So Sengchou, who was also criticized by Daoxian, because he was willing to leave his cave for a while and go and meet with Emperor Wenchuan of the Northern Qi. And Wenchuan was well known for his great patronage of Buddhism. He gave large sums of money and built temples, was promoted vegetarianism, outlawed killing of meat. He also, in his personal life, however, was a ruthless drunkard who never hesitated to kill his enemies and his family members. And Wenchuan even sponsored a debate between the Taoists and the Buddhist monks. And of course, the Buddhists won because the emperor was a big fan of Buddhism. And then the Taoists were forced to convert to Buddhism. And 4 of the Taoist monks refused to do this, and they were immediately killed. Not very Buddhist. Tough time. At least the earlier emperor, Liang Wudi, he was more sincere. Bodhidharma was criticized by Daoxuan for being too aloof and superior, but of course, even though Bodhidharma remained separate from even the other Chan schools, he was the 28th lineage master from the Buddha from India, so he had a kind of official provenance. He was very direct with Emperor Liang Wudi, and with his comment about no merit. However, Wudi spent the rest of his life observing the precepts and attending at least 4 long retreats in the temple in Jiangang. So he made a strong attempt. The next slide is a map of the movement of where Sengchou, his cave, was in Shuananhai, just near Anyang, and then he would travel to Luoyang to visit with the emperor, the one who had killed the Taoist monks. And then he went back. This was around 550 AD. So the story behind this is in 1983, a cave at a cliff in Shuananhai in northern Henan, near Anyang, was excavated, and the findings were first published in 1988, so relatively recently. On this basis, it was proved possible to identify the site as a cave previously known only from historical sources. And the cave, constructed between 550 and 560, was associated with this monk, Sengchou, who was one of the most famous and influential monks of the 6th century China that we don't know too much of. We don't talk about him because of Bodhidharma's fame now. But at that time, he was especially renowned for his meditation practice, very serious meditation practice in this cave. And in this cave, there are many references to a particular Mahayana text called the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, sorry. And sometimes Michael Radish translates it as the Mahaparinirvana Mahasutra. There's no second Maha in the Chinese, but that's okay. So other researchers, they've gone and they've measured the cave and looked inside, and you can see that this cave is very small, only about 4.5 feet wide and a little bit less than 6 feet high. Just large enough for one person to sit. There are 2 larger caves on either side, some distance away. And this cave is marked with definitive dates of construction. There are selected verses and texts and engravings of Buddhist figures in and around the opening of the cave and also inside the cave itself. And the researchers have gone in and they've examined this in great detail. And they've discovered that some of the inscriptions on the cave, there are Chinese writing here. You may not be able to see that on the slide, but from this Mahaparinirvana Mahasutra, there are inscriptions in and around this cave. Dr. Radish says features centrally in the textual and iconographic program of a remarkable cave at Chuan-Nanhai. And Radish and others have made an in-depth study of this cave, and he presented these findings at a conference at Stanford, and you can find his talk online. Just put in Sengchou's cave. That's talk at Stanford, Michael Radish, and it'll come right up, and it's a wonderful video. It goes into great detail. So this Nirvana Sutra, also called the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Mahasutra, this version that was used by Sengchou was the one by Dharma and translated by Tan Wu Chan, and it's considered the most complete and likely the one that was used by Sengchou. And it contains sections describing a meditation on the decomposition of the body. So on the outside of the central grotto, there's an inscription to the monk Sung Chuan, another monk, making an offering. And then the second inscription says, the light shines brightly on the bodhisattva of noble virtue. And then another inscription says, after the thus come one, the Buddha achieved nirvana. He cut off the cycle of birth and death forever. By listening with a sincere mind and heart, immeasurable joy will be attained. And then also on the outside, there's another inscription that says, this is again from the Nirvana Sutra section, all are afraid of the sword and the rod. No one fails to love one's own life. By comparing one's own generosity towards oneself, by treating others as you would want to treat yourself. Do not kill or indignantly strike anyone or hit anyone with a stick, more literally. And then one other inscription says, remember the Buddha, remember the Dharma, remember the Sangha. Yen Fo, Yen Fa, Yen Sang. So Sengchou's meditation method, well, we experienced it this morning. He said that this was based on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it was the version that was found in this Nirvana Sutra. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness is now called the white bone meditation, the term by Michael Radish. I think it's appropriate. So it varies from the original Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If we go to the next slide, we can see the 4 foundations of mindfulness of the body, feeling, mind, and phenomenon. And each can be subdivided into different parts. And the mindfulness of the body divided into 6 parts include the review of the body, and the postures, the elements, and the stages of decomposition. And as you can see, those of you who went through the practice with me, indeed, this is found in this Nirvana Sutra, but in its own way. The next slide, you can see the 32 parts of the body as organized by Buddhaghosa in the Visuddhimagga. You can see the 32 parts of the body in the next slide. This is from the original Satipatthana, and 23 are internal, and the Sengchou version are 28 parts, as I count them. Neither Michael Radish nor myself, when we look at the Chinese, we can't find 32. We can only find 28. But interestingly enough, if you compare this to what's popular in the United States with the original teachings from John Kabat-Zinn, for example, on MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, he goes through the body. He goes only through the outside of the body initially. More recently, in the last few years, they've also included internal organs, but the original Buddhist teachings included mostly internal organs. And of course, Sengchou's version, which is in this slide here, a lot of small words, but this is Michael Radish's abbreviated version of the 12 parts that I just led you through. If you go to the next slide, this is the Mahaparinibbana Mahasutra from the Taisho, from the in Chinese. This is the very first part, and you can see the Taisho line markings, and this is the section that was translated. So it's about 3 or 4 pages of this text to get to the Mahaparinibbana Sutra here. And this is what I used as the outline for the meditation that we just went through. Modernizing it just a little bit and making it a little bit more coherent for us. So, we can skip this chart. I think we can also see that we won't have time so much to get into the problem with Sengchou. I'm going to skip. So the next, this is, yes, oh, if you go back to the other slide, yes. So one of the controversies has to do with that Sengchou. Let me just speak extemporaneously here for a moment, because we started 3 or 4 minutes late. But one of the problems is that John McCrae, who is a brilliant researcher, he said, based on his research, and probably accurate, that Huineng, the cook, and Sengchou, the more favorite older student of the 5th lineage master Hongren, they could not have been at East Mountain Monastery at the same time. That Sengchou left long before Huineng arrived. So it's not possible that they could have had this debate. But all of the researchers who look at this material, they all agree with John McCrae, except I have a possible solution to the problem. And that is that Hangrun may have sent a message to all of his students that were around at that time and said, I'm going to have this giving of my robe because I'm going to die in 3 years. That's what he said. And he may have sent out messengers to the different students. They might not have all been at East Mountain at the same time. And that could have included Sengchou, who would have been in Luoyang at that time. And he could have said, come to East Mountain so that we can have this meeting. And when they arrived, then they had the poetry contest. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Sengchou would have been living there, but he certainly could have traveled there because, as this map shows, that it's about 500 kilometers, 310 miles, and he could have traveled that easily on foot over a couple of week period. So it's because we know that many of the teachers, they moved, they went from, Bodhidharma went from Jiankang to Mount Song, and that's much further, 465 miles. We know that, from East Mountain, there are, to all the way to where Huineng ended up in Nanhui district. There was 625 miles. So people were traveling around at this time. So this is my solution to this particular problem. This next slide is a picture of Huineng's Bao Lin Monastery that was then changed the name to Nanhua in MABA town. So maybe we can have a trip all the way from MABA to MABA town one day. And we can, I'm sure that some of our friends at the monastery may have visited this place. It's quite developed now. At the time Huineng started there were just a few buildings, but he received a great support. So something I want to say about this, if we go to the last slide, if we could. What is the psychological moral of this story? So whatever way you practice, be diligent and follow the precepts. Do not seek power, wealth, and fame. Shun your titles and accolades. Have your practice based on a firm principle consistent with the Dharma, knowing that all things are impermanent, imperfect, unsatisfactory, and impersonal, without self. So this is the little bit of the story. I hope I've introduced some of these characters to you in an appropriate way that you can learn a little bit more about. I know that the names are a little unfamiliar because of translation. We're not used to pronouncing the names. I haven't done such a great job in pronouncing them either. So, but I hope you know a little bit about this wonderful monk, Sengchou, and that he was a diligent practitioner and has something to offer us. And that the story about all of the legends and everything from Bodhidharma to Huineng, perfectly good to have that story as well, but to realize that there's more to the story. There's a subtext there that's kind of important, and that we can learn from this, and we can realize that throughout the history of the world, we have great masters, some of whom are well known, some not so well known, but they can help us in our practice and they can teach us important lessons. So thank you very much, and I wish all of you well today.